Evening, everyone. My name is Rob Hoffa. I'm an Associate Dean of Research in the Faculty of Arts at the University of Manitoba, and I'm happy to be here tonight on behalf of the Office of Vice President of Research International, University of Manitoba, to open this evening's panel discussion, which tonight includes several of my colleagues from the Faculty of Arts. The Café Scientifique are coordinated and hosted by the Office of the Vice President of Research and International, University of Manitoba, with the financial support of the Canadian Institutes for Health Research, which is Canada's largest research funding agency. This year, the series of cafes are sponsored by the Institute for Infection and Immunity. We thank them for their sponsorship. We'd also like to thank the University CIHR delegate, Dr. Peter Catini, for his leadership in submitting the proposals for these cafes. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the Café Scientifique, they began in the late 20th century as a series of informal discussions about scientific subjects. They were never intended to be lectures. The same holds true for the University of Manitoba, the Café Scientifique. These cafes provide insight into health-related issues of popular interest to the general public, and in turn provoke questions and provide some answers. Tonight, we have a very exciting and relevant topic for the cafe, which obviously has resonated with all of you, because we have a great turnout here for tonight. The topic being practical solutions for developmental disabilities. I'd like to introduce your moderator for this evening, who will tell you more about the panelists and some of the ground rules that will guide this evening's discussions. Dr. Angela Cornick is the Director of the Autism Programs and Clinical Services at St-Amant. She's also Adjunct Professor and Clinical Associate in the Department of Psychology at the University of Manitoba. Dr. Cornick received her doctorate in psychology from the University of Manitoba and is a registered psychologist in the province of Manitoba. She's worked in the field of developmental disabilities and autism for over 30 years. Please welcome Dr. Cornick.
Thank you, Dr. Hoffa, and good evening, everyone, and welcome for this evening's discussion. I'll be your moderator, as Dr. Hoffa said, and I'll start by giving you a quick overview of how we plan to proceed this evening. Each of the panelists will speak for 5 to 10 minutes about their perspective on the topic of discussion. After all the panelists have spoken, I will open the floor up for questions and discussions and your comments. And I'll be passing the mic around so we can all hear your comments and questions. This evening's panel presentation are being video recorded and for later uploading on the Café Scientifique website. There's also someone taking photos of the panelists while they speak. A link to the video will be posted on manitoba.ca/Café Scientifique website next week. We are live tweeting this cafe, and the hashtag is Café Scientifique. Did I say it right, James? Café Scientifique. I'll be taking the last question around 8:25 this evening, and then wrap things up. There are refreshments at the materials table and a sign-up sheet, so you can receive notifications of future events of this nature. And you'll notice also there's evaluation forms on your tables, so please don't forget to fill them up and leave them in the material, on the materials table. As well, you'll notice that there's a ballot box, so please feel free to get up anytime you put your names in the box. There will be a draw at the end of the evening for one of 2 Café Scientifique mugs. You'll need to be present at the time of the draw to win. Okay? Before we start, I'd like to remind everybody that this is a discussion forum, and we would like to ask that specific treatment or questions about problems not be asked, as the panelists are here to respond to the questions of a general nature and discuss. That brings me tonight to the expert panel. On my far left we have Dr. Dickie, and next to him Dr. Javier Virués-Ortega, then Dr. Janine Montgomery, and Ms. Joyce Douglas. Our first speaker this evening is Dr. Dickie. Dr. Yu is a professor of psychology at the University of Manitoba and director of St-Amant Research Center. He has served as an educator, researcher, and clinician in developmental disabilities and autism for over 30 years. He has been a primary researcher for many projects funded by the Canadian Institutes of Health Research. His research focuses on developing effective assessment and interventions for improving choice making and for enhancing knowledge exchange between practitioners and researchers.
Thank you. Need to turn this on? Or is it? Okay. Very good. Thank you, Angela. I want to start tonight by saying a few words about developmental disabilities and problem behaviors, which are the keywords of our topic tonight. Many of you probably already familiar with information on developmental disabilities, but so bear with me if you're already familiar. Developmental disability is a chronic condition, often accompanied by cognitive impairment. Very often, it's also accompanied by physical impairment. Many individuals with developmental disabilities require intensive support in daily living and in educational settings. Approximately 1 to 3% of the general population are affected by this condition. Among people with developmental disabilities, about 10 to 15% also exhibit some problem behaviors. Almost 2/3 of this group are adolescents or young adults who are probably in school. Some examples of problem behaviors may include self-injury, ingesting inedible items, or being aggressive towards others. Now, there are obvious health concerns about severe problem behaviors. In addition, individuals who exhibit problem behaviors are often associated with very poor outcomes in educational as well as social outcomes, in addition to the difficulties in health outcomes. Severe problem behaviors also limit the learning opportunities for individuals, and it may also severely limit the life quality for these individuals. Not to mention that these challenging behaviors could create a very stressful environment for their caregivers, for other students in a classroom setting, as well as for teachers. Special education teachers probably struggle every day to deal with problem behaviors in classroom settings. What they need, we were told that they need up-to-date, sound scientific knowledge on effective techniques for reducing problem behaviors and how to manage these challenging behaviors in school environments. Such knowledge does exist. Unfortunately, they're not very easily accessible, and they're also not very user-friendly. Typically, they're buried in scientific journals, and they are often written in technical languages. So, what can we do to help teachers receive this information what can we do to help bridge the gap, to put these knowledge into the hands of the people who may benefit from receiving the information. A few years ago, a group of us, including researchers and teachers, came together and attempted to address this question by proposing to implement and evaluate a knowledge translation and exchange process. And tonight you'll hear some of the discussions related to this particular project by some of the colleagues on this particular team. Let me just give you a very quick overview of the process that we implemented and evaluated. The team include teachers and researchers and many students. And the team works as a cooperative partnership between researchers and teachers. Questions are then solicited from teachers by the team members. The team members then form working groups, and each working group will work with teachers to refine the questions and to identify exactly what type of information they need in order to address some of their concerns. After that, each working group put together an action plan which consists of finding the relevant information, synthesizing that information, and then delivering the findings in a practical and useful format so that it can be readily used by practitioners. Our evaluation, very briefly, to date shows that teachers very much appreciate the products that have been generated by the working groups, and the team members also seem quite satisfied with the knowledge exchange process. Before I turn over to my colleagues, I just want to close by mentioning that it would come as no surprise that our team is very large. It included many researchers, some from psychology, some from nursing, from community health sciences, and teachers, and also many university students who worked with us on the project as trainees as well as research assistants. I want to take the opportunity to thank all the team members for their hard work. The time and format of the Café preclude us having the entire team up here to tell their story. So you're going to have to settle for us.
Thank you, Dickie. Our next speaker is Dr. Javier Virués-Ortega. He is an assistant professor in the psychology department at the University of Manitoba and researcher at the St-Amant Research Center. He conducts research on effective assessment and treatment methods for individuals with developmental disabilities. His areas of research include challenging behaviors, learning, and evaluation of effective interventions. He has published over 50 studies in these and other related areas within the last few years.
Thank you, Angela. Well, I'll try to follow up, maybe providing some further details of what the contributions of our team have been and continue to be, because it's an ongoing project on the initiative that Dr. Yu just introduced. An interesting feature of this project is that it allowed professionals from very different backgrounds to come together and interact try to find a common language and determine in what way their different areas of expertise could contribute to the needs of one another. So, of course, in these dynamics that were initiated in this project, the input provided by the teachers, which were the first line workers and practitioners in the research team, was essential. So one of the strategies that we used was to conduct surveys among teachers to determine what their interests and what their needs were in terms of using evidence from research in their work. So through these surveys, they identified different areas or different topics that they perceived that they needed additional training, or that they needed additional understanding of different aspects of their work. So as a result of these surveys that we conducted with a number of teachers from the St-Amant school in this particular project, the issue that was ranked the highest among these teachers was phrased as follows. We need to easily identify leisure activities that could help to engage individuals with profound disabilities, profound intellectual and developmental disabilities. And the group that I had the opportunity to coordinate with other professionals, including teachers and graduate students from psychology, was given this question, and our role was to try to come up with some answers and come up with, if not solutions, at least some tools that teachers could potentially use and implement in their work to address this, which was perceived as a very important need by the teachers. So this request from the teacher put us into contact with a large body of literature on what we call preference or choice. Very recently, a report issued by the European Union has established that a very, very important priority in interacting with individuals with disabilities is to try to provide them with the opportunity to make their own choices and to speak their own preferences. And this was related with the request made by the teachers, because to identify enjoyable and leisure activities that would be perceived as so by people that have frequently very severe problems in communication, really require us to understand how they can make choices. How can they identify an activity or a task, either academic or leisure, as preferable? And potentially by identifying those activities, we could facilitate that they would be engaged in those leisure academic activities for fairly long periods of time. So our team screened the literature, and we went through literally hundreds of studies on choice behavior and assessment of preferences in people with disabilities. And this literature, as Dr. Yu just pointed out, was very extensive, deal with complex research methods, has produced a number of strategies to evaluate preference and choice in this population, and it's really complex to try to make sense of it and try to filter out what strategies and what tools can actually be transferred to the school from this huge body of literature. So we thought that we could contribute. There is a fairly large body of evidence, and there is an applied need from the teachers. So the role of our team was to bridge the gap between scientific knowledge and applied need. So one of the things that we did is to go through all this literature and filter pieces of evidence produced by these different studies to determine what features of a particular client matched a specific method to evaluate preferences and choice. And the assessment of preferences in individuals that have severe communication impairments usually requires them to behave in a certain way, and from their behavior we can infer preferences. But there is a number of ways in which you can present activities or tasks or different items and observe their reactive behavior upon the presentation of those items. And the presence of different sensory impairments, the presence of different levels of cognitive ability, of motor functioning of the individual is going to determine which of these procedures is going to be, or is more likely to be successful with this particular client. So we went through all this literature and extracted evidence-informs strategies and pieces of evidence that we could put together in a user-friendly model that clinicians could use. I'm not going to go into much detail, maybe that could provide the opportunity for questions later. But the final outcome of this process was a set of questions, 12 unambiguously posed questions that could be answered as yes or no. And those questions dealt with characteristics of the client. For instance, does this particular client present problem behavior? So you need to assess choice and preference under the presence of problem behavior. Do you want to assess the preference toward a particular item, or do you want to assess the preference toward multiple items? Do you want to assess the preference for social activities or for leisure activities, and so forth? So this series of ambiguously posed questions eventually led the practitioner to the strategy of choice, strategy that according to be successful with that particular client. Of course, the outcome of all this process, again, was a journal article. So we were trying to get away from scientific evidence to make it available to teachers, but our end product was, again, a scientific product. So that couldn't be the end of the process. We needed to do something else. So although this step, I think, was necessary to actually come up with a clinical decision-making model that we could transfer to the school and to the clinic. So the next project connected to the first that we initiated was to incorporate this model and all the strategies identified through this model into an iPhone application, an iPhone and iPad application. Basically, well, I'm assuming that everybody's familiar with these handheld devices, and they are increasingly being used for different teaching purposes. And as a matter of fact, very frequently individuals with disabilities enjoy interacting with these items. So we thought it was a perfect medium to facilitate the translation of the knowledge piece that we've developed to school and to educational settings. So we team up with the program of biomedical engineering here at the University of Manitoba, and some of the engineers there, led by Ahmed Bayowi and Dr. Sarah Musavi and others, help us to develop this this piece of equipment. So for a period of about 2 years, and we are still finishing now. The app is already developed. We are just finalizing the project, but it's been a very long process. Through this fairly long time, we've been able to incorporate all these assessment strategies and decision-making model that we developed into this iPhone application, and we are hoping to make it freely available for $1 fairly soon. So that was one outcome that we thought was directly usable product from this knowledge translation process that we initiated. The next step, once the app is already available, would be to ask the teachers to use it, get their feedback, and determine if they can actually use it and implement it in a way that is conducive to the goals of their work. So we're in the process of designing a new study that is attempting to do just that. So I guess I can stop here, and maybe during the questions I can provide more details about this particular project, also other projects that are currently being conducted in our lab about problem behavior and effective treatments and interventions for people with intellectual disabilities.
Thank you, Javier. Our next speaker is Dr. Janine Montgomery. She's an associate professor in the School Psychology Graduate Program in the Department of Psychology at the University of Manitoba. She's an educator who has worked as a classroom and resource teacher in Red Deer, Alberta, and as a sessional lecturer and clinician in the College of Education at the University of Saskatchewan. Her research focuses on social cognition and includes explorations of emotional intelligence, executive functions, and theory of mind. Her work examines characteristics, assessments, and treatments for groups with social cognition. She conducts clinical work in various areas related to her research program and school psychology training. She trains her students as knowledge mobilization professionals in the scientist practitioner model.
Thank you, Angela. I'm going to talk to you actually about two different teams today. There's another team member who isn't here tonight who led a team very similar to the team I led. So we've had a few discussions, and we decided that I would present for both of our teams, as they were both practical interventions that emerged from those teams. So my team was Working Group 1, and Working Group 1 basically addressed a question that the teachers at St-Amant School posed to us. And that question was, thank you, I'm going cross-eyed looking at it too, so you'll have to just don't look at my eyes. And so Working Group 1 was asked, what are effective strategies to intervene with challenging behaviors in students who have developmental disabilities, including autism spectrum disorders? And when they talked about challenging behaviors, the teachers told us the challenging behaviors that they were speaking about were things like hitting, kicking, spitting, and self-injury. Basically anything that would stop the student from either engaging in learning themselves, or marginalize that student, or cause problems for other people around that student that might impact other students' learning, or impact the workers around the student, the teachers and the educational assistants. So that was the first question. I'm going to tell you what Working Group 3 studied as well, because you'll see where the overlap is here. So Working Group 3's question was very similar. So now that Working Group 1 has been asked to identify what strategies you can use to intervene in the moment or in advance, Working Group 3 was asked, how do you train professionals in schools to use those strategies? So they're very related to each other, and I'm going to speak about both of those projects kind of together, and just say that I want to thank Shaheen Shustari, who's not here and who led Working Group 3, but gave me some information to bring to you this evening. So what we did basically in both projects was to do a literature review initially. So we went into the literature and we said, what has already been done on this subject? So we defined some search terms that we thought captured all of the important information in the questions the teachers had given us, which we actually went back and forth on a number of times to make sure we got them right. And that was quite a big part of this process. So we did that, we put together our synthesis. That sounds quite simple. It wasn't that simple. It took a very long time to get through the amount of literature that we were looking at and to really narrow it down to what is really applicable to the age of students that we're looking at, which was age, correct me if I'm wrong, Joyce, age 6 to 21. Did I get it right? My memory for numbers is not great. So we wanted to look at that context, and particularly students who had autism and other developmental disabilities and intellectual disabilities. So that's our population that we were looking at. What we found in our research synthesis was that there are a number of strategies that you can use that are effective. It's not just one type of strategy. It varies. But there are different sorts of things that increase the effectiveness of different types of strategies. We also did find some strategies that aren't effective at all as well. So I want to point that out. Not all strategies are. There are strategies that are research-based. And some of those are really more easily applied to school settings. And so, so we found these strategies. One of the key things in the strategies that were effective was the use of something called functional assessment. So basically that's a procedure any of you behaviorists out here would know, or school professionals, that you go and you basically identify what is the function of the behavior. What research has found as a whole is when this is part of the process of intervening with a student, that you actually do a good functional assessment, identifying what seems to be causing the behavior, and then, here's the catch, plan your intervention to use that information appropriately, that you increase the effectiveness of your intervention. And when I said there's a catch, it's because the literature shows that a lot of school-based interventions will do a functional intervention, but then they don't match that to their actual intervention. So they'll do the functional assessment, but they don't match what they found to what they're doing with the students. So there's a disconnect there. So that was an important finding, or something that we re-emphasized. Others had found that. We've re-emphasized it in our report. So that's kind of the gist of what we found for working group 1. There are a whole bunch of strategies you can use for different types of behaviors, like hitting, kicking, spitting, in different situations for different kids. What we did then is decided that's great, we can write a wonderful journal article about that, and teachers like Joyce will yell at us and say, please don't say meta-analysis one more time. So, we wanted to be more practical. So we went back and forth with our teams, and we came up with the idea of writing some scripts that teachers and educational assistants and other school-based professionals who work with the type of students we're talking about can use in the moment. They can practice them in advance so that they become fluent, and then they can use them for different scenarios. Now, those scripts don't replace the other professionals in the school, but they're kind of a stopgap for when you really need to intervene with the behavior and you just need a quick and effective solution. Not to say that you won't be consistent and reapply those sorts of things, because those principles are important too. But it is a bit of a stopgap. It is not meant to replace formal training in behavior management. We do have some samples of those scripts here, and I'll just say, I'll back up one more step and say, the way that we came up with those scripts is we went through the articles that ended up being summarized in our synthesis, and we pulled out the practical aspects. So when the researcher said, well, first I said the child's name, and then I gave the child a toy, we just translated that into our own scripts. So I have to give you that information, that our scripts may not perfectly adhere to that science. It was that bridging that we were trying to do. So yeah, there's give and take there. So with working group 3, as I mentioned before, we did a similar process. We went and we did a review of literature, we put together a lovely paper, and we found we were looking at 2 different areas with that. How do you train individuals to effectively intervene with challenging behavior? So the 2 kind of areas that came out of that is, one is, what are the training methods you can use? So are they workshops, are they videos, are they one-day PD sessions, are they half-day sessions, is it a 5-day course? Those sorts of things. So that's kind of the how they did the training. And then we also looked at the content of the training as well. And what we ended up doing with that, because there was such a mass of diverse, different things that were done in the field, is we ended up with our team coming up with categories that we could place each of those training components or content of training into. So the long story short is we ended up categorizing 3 different categories, and we called them reduce, manage, and cope. And so in essence, the strategies that we came up with, or the strategies that we identified that seemed to be effective, effective in reducing challenging behaviors and also making staff feel more effective at handling challenging behaviors and all the good stuff that comes with that. Those ones were in those 3 categories. So they either reduced the amount of behavior you saw, so a specific intervention applied methodically, strategically, consistently, would result in fewer incidents of that behavior. That's one way of dealing with it. Another is to teach managing. So that might be, how do you manage the behavior in the moment? That might be including things like redirection strategies and all sorts of different things you can do in the moment where you're in a situation and you need to handle what's going on. And the third area that came up in our study was probably my favorite area, and we jumped on this one pretty quickly because it's becoming an emerging and unique area in the research. But what we found was that strategies that train staff to cope with the everyday experience of dealing with challenging behavior seem to be quite effective at reducing not only the incidence of challenging behavior, but also increasing how staff feel about how well they do about it, and helping them to enjoy their jobs better staff satisfaction rates, and better interactions with the individuals they work with. And the 2 particular areas we looked at were something called emotional intelligence and something called mindfulness training. So long story short, again, we identified all these things, put them in a paper, and then we said, what are we going to do with this? What we decided to do with consultation with the school was pull out some of those new and exciting emerging categories and develop some workshops for teachers. So the workshop that we ended up developing was a workshop on mindfulness and emotional intelligence, and it's about increasing your personal capacity to handle stress and to choose to problem solve effectively in the moment when it can be so challenging. Now there's a lot more that goes with mindfulness and emotional intelligence, and I won't talk about that right now, but just to give you an idea of what we did, those are kind of the different products that were more applied and practical that came from our projects. So in summary, I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything that Shaheen wanted me to say. And a few of the comments that she had made that I should share with you is, in addition to the content that I told you about, the experience of working with multidisciplinary teams who are interested in translating knowledge was really, really useful for a lot of the researchers on the team, as it sort of oriented them to a different way of seeing things. So that was part of what was really beneficial. This collaborative process was really skill building, not only for the researchers but for the students. And so that was a really important outcome of the project as well. And of course the practical products that come out are really, really beneficial, and we know that because we've been getting really good feedback from the teachers who are ordering them. We have school divisions ordering our scripts, handing them out, and sharing them with their staff, and ordering workshops. And maybe Joyce is going to talk a little bit more about the workshop that she's involved in with the other working group. But, yeah. So I think that's all I'm going to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Janine. Our next speaker this evening is Ms. Joyce Douglas. Joyce is the acting principal at St-Amant School, and she has worked at St-Amant School for 14 years in various capacities. She was instrumental in starting a classroom that was designed to teach students to manage their own behaviors. Joyce has a BA in psychology, an education degree, and a post-baccalaureate. She has worked on the knowledge translation team for 4 years. Currently, she's working on obtaining her level 1 administrative certificate, and Joyce's life is balanced by her husband, 2 children, and 2 dogs.
Only the husband is here. I'm here to talk about the practical side, because when this project started, it started with a conversation which was that we researchers can give you teachers the information you need quickly. And the definition of quickly is different, because we thought that might be a week or 2, and the articles would come and we would just be able to take that knowledge and use it. So that was a huge learning experience for myself as a teacher, and that sort of hurry up and wait kind of way researchers seem to work. So for me, it was a challenge. But on the other hand, I was very committed to the students in our school. So I just want to spend a couple of minutes just telling you who the students are and who we are as teachers at St-Amant School. The school is part of St-Amant, And about 40 children who do reside at River Road Place come to school every day. We're a year-round school, and every child is welcomed and every child is accepted, no matter what challenges they bring with them. In addition to that, we had noticed that there were a few children, young adults more, but teenagers, who were being marginalized, even in our school, because of their challenging behavior. So I didn't want to challenge, we'll use Janine, because why not? I didn't want to challenge Janine by asking her to do something that she might not like, because she might hit me. So I just left Janine alone. And I noticed this trend was happening. So that's when I decided to group a whole bunch of kids together who had challenging behavior, so we could create environments for them that allowed them to have demands placed on them, which I think is really important, and be challenged. So we already had this classroom, and we were doing a lot of things that were not research-based, and I suddenly became a little fearful that was I doing more harm? Was there things that I was doing, that we were doing in this classroom, that weren't going to actually change people's lives for the long term? The other thing is, so the other 15 students, because there are 55 students in our school, come in every day from schools, from different school divisions. These kids come to us because they really are the most challenging to educate in regular classrooms. I advocate for inclusion if it works, but I also advocate that if a child needs a specialized program, that they need to have that opportunity to learn in an environment that works for them. So we had this, but again, none of it was research-based, and it was all sort of kind of reactive. I mean, we all had some psychology background, and we had education background, and we learned through trial and error. But if we were going to grow this program, we needed to really have some research behind us. And to be completely honest, I really thought it was going to be faster than this. When they said there were 400 articles, I'm like, okay, let's just read them. And then I learned about good research and not good research and social validity, and what else did I learn? I mean, there was lots of things that, you know, were new to me, and it wasn't just read and do. But the commitment that our teachers have to teaching these students is intense. And when I say teachers, I'm including instructional assistants, because I can be a teacher, but I need 8 other people to be working with these students and doing a good job and come back the next day. I need them to want to come back. I need them to have that same commitment and the same knowledge and the same, I don't know, love for it. I don't know what the word is, but the same passion for it. So making sure staff are comfortable, not injured, and have a basis to do their work, a base from which to jump off to do their work was really, really important. And I'm not blind. I know there's a lot of turnover in this area. I see it. Now that I'm acting principal, I mean, I'm hiring. There's a lot of turnover. People get burnt out very quickly when you're working with people with challenging behavior. The people who have challenging behavior need us to be there consistently. So we've got to disconnect. So while they were doing their research, and I was helping them, we were still having to do the work, because that's the challenge of being in the classroom. We couldn't say to these kids, you know what, hold off your behavior for 4 more years, because the researchers are going to give us some product. So we still had to do our work. And so while we totally agree that functional analysis is really important, we can't wait for the I can't even say the word, it's like a swear word sometimes, but I can say swear words. But it's like, so we had to keep going. So some of the time, it was a little scary, right? Like, are we doing more harm? Are we doing, could we be doing something wrong? The great news is that the research validated what we've been doing all along. Yes, we could have done more of this or that, but the research really validated. And the parts that really validated for me was we used scripts from day one. Why? Because I have so many staff and so much turnover that I wanted consistency. Why do I want consistency? Because I figured if you're consistent, it was going to work. Guess what? the research said first and foremost that consistency was the most, even if you do a mediocre strategy, if you do it consistently, you're going to have better results than if you do it, inconsistently. So that was really validating. The other part that was validating is it wasn't just us who were having a hard time emotionally, physically dealing with these. It was validating to know that this is enough of a problem in the world, that there's at least 400 articles written about staff being challenged working with this population. So that was validating. So, and also, it was fabulous to have a group of teachers, there's 8 of us, who get to work together every day and problem solve together. We realized that we were so unique that most schools don't have this luxury. They have 1 or 2 teachers, or divisions might have 1 or 2 teachers, and so they don't have this ability. We meet twice a week as teachers and go through issues, and sort of like a clinical model, and how would you do this? How would you solve this? So we had each other, but a lot of teachers don't have that, so they needed the practical tools. So we're really proud of, I'm really proud that finally we can give the teachers some scripts, we can give them some strategies with the understanding that you don't, as I think it was Janine said, we don't leave the other clinicians out, but this is what we're doing while we're figuring out the other part of it all. One of the other working groups I just want to mention before I stop was looking at medication, and I just want to quickly talk about the role of medication. As teachers, we don't tell anybody what medication they should be on. Well, some teachers do, but we don't. And we don't tell people how to take their medication, etc. However, we're dealing with the effects of that medication on a day-to-day basis, because no medication comes without side effects. Every medication has some side effect. So we needed to understand what to expect from people when this big name came in, like they're on such and such and such and such a drug, and what were we to expect from this? So you do get those pharmacy printouts. Has anyone ever read those pharmacy printouts? So we really needed that to be simplified and put into a way that teachers could access quickly. So if a child was behaving in a certain way and they knew that they were on this drug, that could explain it. Or if you were trying to teach a child to not eat a lot, but you've just put them on they've just got on a medication that increases their appetite, what are we opening the door for, right? Challenging behavior. So this kind of, knowing about the medication was really important to us because it does really inform our practice. So that was the other working group. Have I enjoyed being part of a research team? I say not, but I think I really have. It's been a challenge because I think my role was to just keep bringing people back. But what does that mean? But what does that mean? How can we use that? Because, as Javier said, the articles that get published are in the scientific journals. We've tried to get a couple of the more lay papers published, and that's not where the interest is. Teachers want practical solutions, and scientists need scholarly articles, and I think that we now have got both, and so, yeah, I'm excited to now go out. Janine mentioned we did one workshop at our school a few weeks ago, and as a result, I've just been booked for 3 more. So there is a need for that, for people who want to go out, learn about scripts, why they're important, how to use them. So, yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Joyce. Thank you, Joyce. Thank you. And now I would like to open the floor up for your comments and questions. If you want to get up and help yourself to some refreshments, please do. And you can also put your name for the draw as well. Okay. I'll be playing the part of talk show host for a little bit and roaming microphone holder, so we can hear all your comments and questions. You can either ask your question, a specific question, to one of our experts, or you can pose your question to the panel in general. Okay, so we could start with some question. And
Hi, I'm just interested in hearing a bit about how you involve families in the process in developing the scripts or workshops or anything in that regard.
I'm going to answer that one because that was partially my role, was to try and involve families, and boy did we try. We invited families. At first we just sent a letter to all the families in the school to say that the teachers were working on this and we'd like some parents on board, and we got no response. Then we targeted a few parents, who we thought might be interested, and I think we asked 5 and 4 said for sure, and then we never saw them again. And then about 2 years into the project, we had a parent night, and I phoned every parent individually and invited them, and we did get about 8 families out that night. And all they wanted to do was talk, and you know what? I got it. It was the first time they were in a room with other people who were experiencing the same things that they were, and they had a chance to vent and talk to each other and problem solve, and where did you find a good doctor and all that kind of stuff. So at that point, we did try one more follow-up by email. At that point, we just decided that families weren't ready to be part of this process necessarily. I think part of the reason is that the parent pool that we were pulling from are parents who've, the kids who come for day school come because things have really been bad for them in other schools. So these are very tired parents, in my opinion, and they were happy to be able to just let loose and let somebody else take care of the problem. They're very interested in what we do every day. They want to know, they want the solutions, they want the strategies, and they want the one-on-one IP time to talk about their child. But they weren't ready, from the different ways we tried, they weren't ready to have that conversation yet.
Any other questions? Anybody for the mic?
sir.
Ask you a question. Thanks. I guess I'm just wondering, I think you can probably hear me, I don't know if I need this, but I understand that the teachers that were part of your study, were they just from St-Amant School, or was it from schools across the city?
No, we just used the teachers at St-Amant School because, I don't know why. Why, Dickie? Because we're sitting ducks.
Well, we already have when we came together initially, we already have a very strong relationship ongoing with the St-Amant School. And we thought as an initial attempt to implement such a process, the scope of it is actually much bigger than we thought. And we underestimated a lot of things. In terms of time is one of them, Joyce alluded to. So we thought we'd start with the St-Amant School. And certainly I think the long-term hope is that such a process could be extended. And as Joyce mentioned, some of the workshops that they delivered, they're already receiving requests from other schools for those workshops. So we think the products will go beyond the St-Amant School. By the way, I should mention that all the products from our working groups will be available on our website. So you can go visit our website and download the materials. Not everything is on there now, but they will be. Yeah.
It takes time.
I'm a teacher, and dealing with behavior problems is a daily occurrence, but I wouldn't say that most of my students have diagnosed developmental disabilities, and I wanted to know whether your strategies could apply to kids in my classes.
Well, I would say that that's actually who we've designed strategies for. So, yeah, one of the things you can do if you're interested in the scripts is you can contact us, either contact me or the Katie Did info website, the contact there, and you can order some of those. Joyce is doing workshops on the practical scripts we developed, so that's what we didn't link in for you, that some school divisions have found that more helpful. But yeah, definitely very useful. And I think that the broader training of teachers would be useful for you personally and for others in similar situations, as well as like general classroom teachers. They're wellness strategies really that help you handle stress. That's what we're talking about. So really, preschool staff, school staff, high school, it's applicable to all of them. Yeah.
I'm going to offer, because I apparently like a microphone, but one of the things when you ask, like if a child hasn't got a diagnosed developmental disability, good teaching and good strategies apply across the board. So consistency, and the behaviorists in the room who know my long love with behaviorism, and now I am one, you've got to be consistent, and so and you have to value that every child. I don't believe any person wants to behave inappropriately. I don't think that that's the first desire. I think that there's a reason for it, and that we can teach alternative behaviors. So that can be, you know, if you've got a kid who's stressed out in school and does not have a developmental disability, there's a reason they're stressed out, and they might be stressed out and then hit you, whereas somebody might be stressed out and cocoon and not react. So the scripts are able to be adapted for a particular behavior that you're seeing. It doesn't matter if it's a developmental disability or not.
Maybe I can add a comment on that. I mean, most of these behavioral strategies are really not population specific. They are based on, you know, research that goes back to the 30s that was initially done with pigeons and different animals. So it's like they deal with very general learning principles that apply to all humans and arguably to other species. So they are really maybe not directly applicable to all populations, but they are adaptable to all populations because of their generality.
Excuse me if I'm not clear, I've had a stroke and it's left. I've been coaching Special Olympic athletes for a number of years. In fact, with cross-country skiing, which they're really the higher end because it requires a lot more movement and learning to do it. And I come to the conclusion that you need almost a different approach to each individual's student, and yet you can't. I mean, while you're teaching one cross-country skiing over in one corner of the field, the other one is wandering off somewhere, and you've got to chase after him and get him back in again, and so on. And I'm wondering if your approach does enable them to find a group of people, you know, or group, and so you could take these three and those two, have you? I'm sure you have, but have you looked into that?
We actually did, like, when we did the scripts, because everything we do at our school is individualized teaching. That is one of the advantages of teaching special needs, is that you get to teach one-on-one at all times, right? But every child's different. But so what we did with the scripts is we would say, if somebody's hitting, and they're hitting because they're scared, this is a good approach. If they're hitting because you've just said no to them, here's another approach. So we do identify it by behavior. And really what our expectation is that this will just be a model for you to be able to trigger your mind and say, is it environmental? Maybe that kid who's, you know, sitting down on the hill likes cold a lot, right? Likes to feel the cold. What is it about? Why is he behaving that way? So then you can offer it to them in an appropriate way. And that's sort of what the scripts sort of get you thinking about. So they're not meant to be used verbatim. every student in my classrooms has a different script. The poor staff have to learn all the different kinds of scripts, but it's just based on where the behavior is coming from and what it needs to achieve.
One thing I'd add to that, in terms of using them verbatim, I think that's a good place to start. As a teacher myself, I know that when I practice different skills as a teacher, sometimes I would use a script, or sometimes I would use a checklist to do those sorts of things. So that can be a nice support to get you started. Once you've done them a few times and you're comfortable with the way, we've tried to capture the elements of the intervention in there, yeah, you can adapt them to the child for sure. But if you've never done it before, I would suggest that's a good time to use a script.
Here? Okay. Just as a question, I was trying to remember the kind of students that you allow into, or not allow, you have at St-Amant. Have you had anyone with Asperger's?
No. The children at St-Amant School generally have profound developmental delays and comorbidity, like a physical disability or medical disability. From the day students that we have, it would be students who are really on the lower end, well, I hate saying lower, on the more challenging end of the spectrum for both them and their teachers. So Asperger's is higher functioning. Janine, on the other hand, can talk about that.
Depends what you want to know. So it certainly isn't the St-Amant population, and it wasn't the population for this. That said, there's nothing to say that in the future we won't develop things that are a little bit more appropriate for people who are higher functioning on the spectrum. There's a lot of non-behavioral approaches that are used for higher functioning individuals as well, which have some, shown effectiveness, as do behavioral approaches. So there's different ways of looking at it as well. But yeah, if you want to talk maybe one-on-one, that's a good conversation.
I have another comment I want to make. As a teacher for 30 years plus, I taught K to 6. My favorite grade was probably kindergarten. And what I found was part of my role was to be part of early identification. One of my classes that I had, which had 30 students, you had to identify the thing and get your team together. I had 1 year children with ADD, ADHD, FAS, and Tourette's. And all I can say is that I think that I shouldn't say this, but I think I was scripting then, 20 years ago. And I always had a method, and I shared it with my parents because they were volunteers in my classroom. And I just had a very simple way of doing it. And people that are students that I know that your issue is maybe different, but kids that were told, or their parents they were told they should go on Ritalin. By the time I finished with them, they didn't need to be on Ritalin because all you had to do was to calm them down. You had to use the script, if you want to say that, and then I would do something like this. Look, listen, think before you talk, and sit down, cross your legs, and relax. And I realized that maybe that's a bit different than St-Amant, but I think that maybe I was on to a good thing. I don't want to say that, but I'm thinking now, gee, I was glad that I kind of did that kind of thing. And it was basically through trial and error, because after a while you have so many different issues and you have so many parents coming to you wanting to know how to do it, that the best way too was to invite them in the classroom and to have them observe the style, and then they learn by it. But this has been an interesting panel to listen to again, because I'm retired, but I think you never grow old of learning, the new ways.
Thank you. You're talking about self-regulation a little bit in what you're talking about, which when we talk about mindfulness, that's one of the ways we can train train self-regulation. And in fact, you can use it in students in addition, and there's good evidence behind that at different levels. But what you were into is really hot in research right now, so you're cutting edge. I'm just saying.
I guess my question to you is, I'm in early learning, so I'm dealing with children between the ages of 2 to 6. So that's before they get to school. Have you thought of maybe in the future looking at that particular age? Because if the earlier you get them, the easier it's going to be when they get to school. And that's what we found with children that we've dealt with. When we can identify and get those services into process for them, it makes school much easier, because you don't have this kid walking into a classroom, the teacher has no idea what's going on. And we've had the child for maybe 4 or 5 years already. So that's just something I'm curious. Are you thinking?
I think it's a
of dropping?
fabulous idea, and I'm thinking that you might be the first volunteer for the team, Leanne. I know her name too. She's in trouble now. Yeah. So, and that's one of the things is, I mean, we worked with St-Amant because there were good relationships there, and it was a good natural relationship that already existed. But my understanding of the plan, and I was brought in kind of late as the grant went in, so my understanding, kind of 2 years into the idea of developing that plan. But my understanding was that was always kind of the option, and it always is going to depend on time and money to get those things done. Did you guys have anything to add to that?
I think that's an excellent question. There's nothing to prevent a process such as what we have attempted, implemented, and evaluated to address that specific question. We solicited questions from teachers at St-Amant. So the questions that came to us are questions that reflect kind of the burning, desires and questions that they have to address the students that they were working with. Clearly, I think if we focus on the process, if we approach another group of teachers working with a younger group of students, they may have very different questions in terms of the kind of information that they're looking for. So yes, the process could be used to address, it's not specific to age groups or types of students.
Leanne, the how to train staff paper that we did, or the project there, we actually included preschool in that one. So we can talk more. Yes, you do count.
Oh no, you really count. And at St-Amant School, we don't have a lot of little kids who live at St-Amant. We do have a few, and we do the same kind of thing with them. And in fact, we do a lot of intensive stimulation and all that kind of stuff with them to get them, the brain functioning and understanding that it can learn. A lot of the problem behaviors that we are talking about happen a little later in children's lives, because people are more tuned to giving a kid something they want by if they point to it. But if a 12-year-old just points to it, they're not getting it anymore. So then that creates some behaviors. So I think that is one of the other things, is that the behaviors do tend to increase as people get older, and that thing called puberty happens, and it's brutal. I can just say, full moons and puberty is just not a good thing in special ed. So but it doesn't invalidate the fact that early intervention, and Angela does. She can speak to that too.
Just want to clarify, because we're talking about this project occurring at the St-Amant School. St-Amant is an organization that runs a number of programs. We have this residential program, and some of the students are the students that Joyce has in her school. We have individuals that live in community homes around the city and the province. And we support individuals that live with their families in the communities through clinical services. And we have one of the programs I direct, which is the Autism program that deal with preschool. It's the early intensive behavioral intervention program that takes them through school age. And you're right, the early identification is very important, because all the strategies that have been studied, like Javier indicated, they are based on learning principles. We use them, we teach them to parents when we're working with the parents. We teach them to the teachers and the instructional assistants when we're working with them. And we provide workshops and training throughout the community for different schools, for child care facilities, based on the same principles. Just the particular project referred to St-Amant school students that experience a little bit more of the challenges. But behaviors, however, even though children are very young, could be quite severe and and affect them in a way that would also impact their opportunities in the community where they live.
We can add a little comment about that. Our research team at the University of Manitoba, we have a number of projects on problem behavior, self-injury, bruxism, aggression, and other behaviors. And we generally do not have an inclusion criteria that have to do with age. In other words, age is irrelevant in a number of these studies. So we can be working with a client that has 2 years, and the next research session is with a client that has 40 years, and it may be the same study. So the type of interventions that we develop and we're interested in really apply to very, very young children and also to adults on occasion, depending on the study. You can get more information on our website. It's avaresearch.ca. It's not the project website, it's just the website of my lab, but you can have information of the specific projects there.
Any other questions? Roger? Gonna ask
I'll just shout it. Okay. I just had a question around the workshops that are being provided for certain schools and divisions and whatnot. Have you thought about what, if you could assess the effectiveness of those workshops for the student? Do you know what that would look like? Have you started doing it?
Are you talking about directly to this with the student population?
No,
or
I'm
with
talking
the people
about
trained?
the mindfulness
Yeah,
idea, and
yeah.
because you talked about how
Absolutely.
it's definitely from the literature, but the procedure that you put together, is that effective in and of itself for doing what it's meant to do?
Absolutely. And you know what, our program evaluation, which is what it is at this point, has been very preliminary and for feedback and monitoring for how we change things. So the first time we ran, let's say, the mindfulness workshop, for example, we did that with St-Amant staff, and they evaluated and gave us feedback on what we should change, what worked well for them, what they'd like to see in future type of presentations. They also reported on things like stress levels and such. Ideally, we'd like to monitor that long term, but that just hasn't happened at this point. We're more concerned about the products themselves. So yes, we do that routinely. We've also, Sunrise School Division also evaluated both workshops, the scripts and the mindfulness, emotional intelligence workshop. So we are collecting that information, and as I said before, because it's a program evaluation model that we're looking at right now, we are really gathering feedback to make better workshops, with the idea of monitoring those workshops down the road. Absolutely.
Yeah, and in my role as consulting with other schools, I realized that I would come in, give a plan, leave, and then expect them to just ask questions as it was going on. So I've changed that as well. Like, I do check-ins now. I'll give a plan, 3 months time, check in, how's it going, do you need any more assistance, or what do you need? So I'm aware of the fact that, uptake could be challenging. It all looks good on paper and that kind of thing. So that idea has permeated into the work we're doing, but it hasn't been formally researched.
Any other questions? Okay, passing it on.
So I work with international students, actually at the university, and so I always come with a cross-cultural hat. So tonight my question is about the 400 studies, and were they cross-cultural studies? Did they come from different places? And where is the hot research coming from globally?
Winnipeg.
Hey, great.
Okay, well, you have sitting beside you one of the experts in our content analysis, Dr. Toby Martin, right there. So, Toby, you might be asked to speak to this, but I'm just going to quickly say my memory, not very multicultural. I remember our first paper we reported United States, England, and Ireland as the locations for our papers that we located using multinational, multi-language searches. That's what we located. For the other one, I'm not so sure. Toby, any idea?
Yeah, like Janine, I was involved in 2 working groups, and I believe that in the first group, we may have, first of all, limited the language of the papers to French and English. Not at all limited their place of origin. And it's about what you would expect. The lion's share of all of this stuff is coming from the United States. Janine listed some other places. I do recall in the, there were some interesting places of origin in the training study. We saw a couple of studies from the Middle East, but mostly Europe, North America.
I don't know where you'd identify the hotbed of any of these would be, because, and Dickie might be the person to ask, but there's so many different, when we're talking about research in developmental disabilities and autism, there's so many different kind of strands of research. It kind of depends on what you're looking at. Behaviorally though, Manitoba, and I'm not a behaviorist, but Manitoba has an incredibly strong hotbed of behavioral research here, and it's really something we should be proud of.
Hey, we still have a few minutes and time for more questions. If anybody would like to make a comment or have an additional question. No? None at this time? Okay, would you guys like to make some final comments or?
No, we're good.
Would you like to sing? No,
Thank you all very much for coming, and we'd be happy to stick around for a few more minutes if people want to chat. So, there are no more questions.
Oh, yes, we're drawing now.
Yeah.
You mean? Okay.
Well,
Guide me, Janine.
I just thought of one more thing.
Oh,
okay. No, I don't mean.
Okay.
So I understand that people can come to you, but I mean, what about you? Are you reaching out to other provinces now with your research and your ideas? Because I originally started teaching in Ontario.
Well,
so, I mean,
you know what, it depends on how you look at reaching out. We have presented our information, the results in numerous forms in Spain for one, did we do that one in Spain? Yes, you have. You've presented in Spain several times on your project. And the outcomes, yeah. In Ontario, we presented at a conference there. Somebody helped me, the Geneva Conference, which is actually a conference for parents and teachers, and it's a more user-friendly conference. That one, we had some great feedback from Ontario, and we actually ended up sending materials to Ontario. So I think that's the main way we're doing it, although for future projects we are partnering with other provinces on kind of similar sorts of initiatives. But yeah, I don't know, Dickie, do you want to say anything more about that?
We do have collaboration with researchers from other provinces, not specifically for this project. When we applied for funding to CIHR for this project was 2 years back, and usually the story for researchers is we typically, wait till the last minute. So, but perhaps definitely in terms of an extension of this project, Joyce already committed that she will stay with the project forever. And we would definitely be looking at incorporating additional collaborations from other sites.
Very good.
I just have a final question. You mentioned that it took longer than you expected, and I'm just wondering for the rest of the team as we think back, and if you were doing this again, can you take up ways and shortcut the process, or does it need to take up?
That's $1 million question. I don't know whether we have an answer for it, but I think it is a problem that needs to be solved. Synthesizing information is not easy. It cannot be completed overnight. I mean, even sometimes weeks, it takes longer, depending on the question, depending on how much literature exists and so on. So it is a problem. I don't see it as insurmountable. It's identified, and I think it just needs some creativity between researchers and teachers, and work together and solve it.
Well, and as someone who was new to knowledge translation when I came into this project, my observation, and I know I've said it loud many, many times, was that there was a certain socialization to being a knowledge translator that occurred. And I would say that the first 6 months of the project was really spent acculturizing the team to this idea that it's not just about research. We have to think beyond the way we usually present and say things and really connect with the teams we're working with. And so my thinking then is that one of the solutions is having translators on teams so there's a little bit less of a lag there. I don't know. It's one thing. There's other ideas I have too, so we'll talk.
I also think, like, from a teacher's perspective, that yes, we have to be more patient, that I understand. The other thing was that there was an assumption sometimes that we understood each other's language. So once we understood that we didn't, and that when we said one word, people were interpreting it differently, that really made a difference. So if you start with that assumption where you actually, spend the first few weeks defining, or first few meetings defining what you mean by
effective. That was a big sticking point. Believe it or not, it seems like it would be easy to define, but there were very different definitions coming from researchers and teachers and other team members.
So I think that could speed it up about, 6 months, Dickie?
At least.
You wouldn't be able to put that on television. I just think I'd say shows like The Nature of Things. I mean, maybe this isn't the nature of things, but I mean, what about putting up your ideas on television or somewhere?
It's scary enough sitting up here.
I was going to say, that sounds like a YouTube video. I've been trying to picture this YouTube video for ages, and it just doesn't happen. It's harder to do than you think. But yeah, it's certainly, that's a really good point. And I think we all have been thinking about that as we evolve through this process, is, the idea of how do people get their information? And we have to go to the people and ask them, how do you want that information? So I think that's been another big learning piece in the whole project for the whole team.
I'm sorry to keep speaking, but there is also an ethical thing about bringing this to television or something that when we as teachers are going into our classrooms and working with the kids are still private. We're not exposing them publicly to what we're doing, and that's really important to me as a teacher, that we don't use our students, exploit them in any way. So it would have to be done in a way that, if we were to demonstrate it. Like Toby and I presented at the Canadian Conference for Developmental Disabilities and Autism, and we didn't feel comfortable doing video role plays with students, instead, because we just felt that you're going to catch somebody doing something in a very vulnerable moment with challenging behavior. So we decided to act it out instead.
I could see that, obviously, but I guess it's the concept that you want to get across more than anything else.
Angela, if I could just say another word on the why so slow question. Well, because I think that part of the challenge, Javier spoke to it a little bit. The order that he put things is, so we did a paper, but that wasn't the end. Then we needed to have things that would be to offer to teachers that would be relevant for them. Right, but sometimes that paper doesn't come out easily. And so the observation that I would make is, as a research group, we were kind of serving two masters, the teachers and the academic expectations of having a research grant from the Canadian Institutes of Health Research. Some of the products are right for the teachers, but with the grant funding from CIHR, you can't stop there. You've also got to come up with these papers. And that means you take a long time writing a paper, you realize it needs to be retooled because, you discovered there's already a paper that was too close to the one you were going to write, so you got to do something different now. Then you go to trouble doing all the revisions, submit it, and it turns out that the journal that you submitted it to just didn't like it. Well, but they tell you this 6 months after you submitted it. So now you've got to go back and find another journal submitted. I mean, every researcher in the room knows this story very, very well. And when that's mixed in with all this other deliverable work that we need to do, the whole thing bogs down. So I think that's a really fundamental challenge to this kind of work that could help to inform future efforts to...
Just to add to that, I mean, I think knowledge translation can be a speed up if it is conceptualized as a service. But if you do it in the context of university and research, I mean, my personal average from the time I start study and the time that it's published is usually 5, 6, even more years. So, you know, it's a very different pace, and the chain is so long, the filters are so many. But as a service, potentially could be pretty fast.
But maybe it's also part of, like Toby said, research. It's cumulative. It's going to, if more people engage in the same type of studies, more information will be accumulated. Sorry, but we have to finish at this point. And I'd like to thank everyone for coming and participating in our discussion. I hope you liked as much as I did. And thank you to our panelists for, great answers, great points that you made. The next Café Scientifique is on January 13th, and will be on the subject of cardiovascular health. And you can find more information on the Manitoba.ca Café Scientifique website about that. Please remember to fill your evaluation forms and read them. And we're going to draw 2 months.